Hello everyone, I've just finished chapter 27 of Darth Plagueis, and again I enjoyed the chapter. I keep saying that. I know my reviews are very repetitive in these videos, but I'm much better at giving the summary and saying what I thought of it than trying to get into depths. But we get to see again Plagueis. Sidious meets up with Plagueis and talks to him about how the next things they need to do, and Palpatine makes it clear that now that Viceroy Gunray is now the leader of the Trade Federation, and that they're going to be sending more to eliminate the Vigos of Black Sun, which are basically just the leaders. And that's, what's her name? Kamari Vosa? Yeah, Kamari Vosa is someone that they'll eventually have to turn their sights onto, but not right now. And they need to do, and they're going to do that another time. Anyway, Plagueis and Palpatine decide that they need to send Maul off to go and take out the Vigos, so we get a scene of that. To go back a bit though, the Trade Federation Directorate and the leaders of the Nebula Front have all been killed, and this leaves Gunray to be the sole leader of the Trade Federation. Anyway, after Palpatine sees Maul off and gives him instructions of what to do, he has a conversation with Gunray, but before he does, he reflects on Plagueis having survived Sujan, and how even though he was now in safety, he still refused to relax his hyper awareness of being attacked or submitting to sleep. And you can see why, because the entire reason he had that hyper awareness was because he had been jumped by the Maladian assassins serum, and Sidious felt a feeling of jealousy, and he was also trying to look into the future because he was unsure as to what it would look like once they had taken over. And it mentions he had failed to divine Varuna's attack on Sujan, or if he, repressing a sudden feeling of envy, Sidious began to wonder if, blinded by the dark side, he had actually failed to divine Varuna's attack on Sujan, or if he hadn't allowed himself to divine it. And I assume what it means by that, because it's either delight himself in it, or learn about it, or learn about it, or rather sense it. And I'm assuming it means learn or sense. But anyway, he speaks to Gunray and directs them to form a blockade around, and informs them to inform a blockade, to prepare a blockade at least for Naboo, which he doesn't tell them just yet, but he's telling them to pretty much to begin assembling the fleet for the blockade. And I completely forgot, but the Trade Federation and multiple other things, I just realised when I was reading it, the Trade Federation and other places, were beginning to manufacture their own armies to defend against pirates' attacks. So by the taxation of those free trade routes, they're just going to continue to make losses. They're not going to and more they could just increase the shipping price. It's not really something they are wanting to do, is it? And Gunray mentions that to form the blockade, it would be quite a financial risk, with referring to the costs of fuel, and with having to use so many ships that could be used to transport cargo. It would be pretty much cutting up how much money they would be making. And he mentions how there would be no telling how their investors might react to them forming a blockade. But Sidious mentions that he doesn't quite understand that by allying with him he's investing into the future, and that he mentions that, does it not occur to you that your most valued investors are in a position to bring in great profits from your knowledge of what is about to happen? I will say this part of the book, part 3, it's probably the most confusing part, and I'm still struggling to wrap my head around it. Either way, I think I'm just about grasping it. That I forgot to mention, they did steal that shipment. The shipment has been stolen and been transacted into Valorum's company to make it seem like he was in doing the taxation out of greed, not out of action, which is just going to further harm Valorum. He already seems incompetent. He's now going to seem greedy. So Palpatine's doing all he can to ensure that in the feud he's going to create between Naboo and the Trade Federation, he is pretty much almost certain to become Chancellor. But anyway, once that conversation is done, Palpatine wonders, was this a vision of what his future will be? A life where he has to manage every single thing in the galaxy, including, as it puts in the book, Sidious ended the transmission and lowered the cowl. Was this a vision of the future? A life of micromanaging the affairs of incompetent beings while he and Plagueis set into motion the final phases of the grand plan? Or was there perhaps some other way for him to govern in malevolent satisfaction? Anyway, we get to see that Plagueis is off to pay Varuna a visit, and he gradually and stealthily makes his way around, and I assume we weren't going to see Plagueis' lightsaber again. I've seen before that Plagueis doesn't get into another lightsaber duel, and it didn't seem like there was any more need for his lightsaber, and I was correct in that assumption. I think Plagueis just has his lightsaber on hand. Yeah, he doesn't actually use it at any point in the chapter. He just clips it to his belt. But he goes and pays Varuna a visit, who is asleep, and he has a conversation with him, and he tells Varuna that he's there for revenge, and Varuna says that his abdication from office from the throne would have been enough had he not tried to kill Plagueis. And Varuna mentions that everything he had built was in jeopardy, including his position on the throne, and Plagueis had left him no choice. And if Plagueis really does feel a lot like I guess Mrs. Flood with her cherry sundae in Empire of Death, if you've watched that episode of Doctor Who, where she sits down on the bed next to her, and she seems sympathetic and all-powerful, even calling her tiny woman, and this feels very reminiscent of that scene to me, how Plagueis is showing Varuna that power doesn't just come through politics but through the Force, and that that he had delivered the Trade Federation to Ravuna, put Sapelo on the throne, and then Varuna, and he asked how does he imagine he came by such power and influence. And Varuna, and he reveals that Plagueis was trained by Darth Tenebrous, and even says as much that he says, I was shown the way to power by a beef named Ruger Snow. I know the name. Yes, but his true name was Darth Tenebrous, and he wore the mantle of Dark Lord of the Sith. I was at one time his apprentice. And Varuna asks and Plagueis asks Varuna if he had known he was a Sith, would he have allied with him? And Varuna says no, he wouldn't have. And Plagueis says that he appreciates his honesty, and he's slowly killing him with midichlorian manipulation. And we kind of get to see what midichlorian manipulation is like when killing someone. And we see how Varuna is pretty much just getting more tired and weaker and more out of breath, and he's just slowly and gradually dying. But we also get to see that Plagueis, he sits by Varuna while he dies, and Plagueis gets a feeling that he's followed the path to death's door, that he had already travelled that path, and he wondered that had he already gone down it, or was the Force giving him a glimpse into the future? And I think it's actually really interesting, that line, because did he feel that way when he killed Venomous over and over and over, or is this what he was going to feel when he's killed by Palpatine? And I think that's an interesting twist. Anyway, I enjoy the book. Again, part 3 I'm finding it really confusing, but from what I've gathered, part 1 pretty much just set up that Valorum wants to make a taxation for the free trade routes, so that he can send funds to the remote worlds, and that's so they can form militaries. But he also has very little favour. But the Senate is supporting it through from Palpatine's assistance. Varuna is wanting to advocate against it and be in support of the Trade Federation, because then they won't have to pay any extra money. And Palpatine says that this would be in Varuna's best efforts, because he would be able to then get Varuna out. And replace him with Padme once he makes sure that Varuna is unfit for the feuds he needs to create to bring Palpatine up to power. And once he realises that, he pushes out for Padme, and Varuna makes it very clear that he doesn't want to be under the he doesn't want to wants to be making full profits off of the export of the shipping from plasma energy, rather than just getting a cut of it. It's a large cut, but still only a cut of it. He wants those full profits. Remember, Varuna's very greedy, so when Palpatine is able to figure out that he's going to be unfit for it, and needs Padme, and so he brings Padme, and so he's advocating for Padme, so that she can, so that she can show how negligent the Republic is, and also show that the taxation, and also set Valorum up so it seems like he's the taxation is out of greed to support himself rather than to actually help worlds and show out, and that will pretty much, alongside his political incompetence and his that it's pretty much guaranteeing that he will have an early end of term, and this will allow Palpatine to go in. But it's also by creating the feud between the Trade Federation and Naboo, that's going to reveal the crisis. But anyway, we've him sending Maul to get rid of Black Sun, and Plagueis allowing Jabba to deal with Gardula. It's pretty much stopping anything from any plans Varuna may have had in trying to get rid of the Trade Federation. So pretty much Palpatine's trying to create a feud so he can rise up to Chancellorship. That's what I'm getting at anyway. So I guess that should be end off this chapter. I must say I think the scene between Plagueis and Varuna here, Varuna's death, I find it to be quite, I guess, a powerful scene. It feels, I guess you could say, it feels like Plagueis, it's not just the one killing him, but the angel that brings him off to his death, if that makes sense. And it's, to me, quite a powerful and also dark scene. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and goodbye.